Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We are continuing our deep dive into The Handmaid's Tale. And this is a very popular book in the Western world. It is cited by countless talking heads online. And digging into it, diving deep, helps people to know, what's being said, what's being insinuated, what's being hinted at. And it's part of the cultural zeitgeist now. And so it's important to tackle it head on so that the Muslim community can have proper conversations with their daughters when such things come up. Okay, now, we're in part 17 now. There was the whole ceremony section, which I obviously am gonna not cover in the videos because it's inappropriate, but it's a very formulaic ritual where she tries to get pregnant, and it's done in a very weird way, which hints at the author's mind, I'd argue. Okay, so let's begin. This is what I do when I'm back in my room. I look for I'm going to skip that one sentence. She puts her nightgown on. I look for the pat of butter in the toe of my right shoe, where I hid it after dinner. The cupboard was too warm. The butter is semi-liquid. Much of it has sunk into the paper napkin I wrapped it in. Now I'll have butter in my shoe. Not the first time, because whenever there is butter, or even margarine, I save some in this way. I can get most of the butter off the shoe lining with a washcloth or some toilet paper from the bathroom tomorrow. I rub the butter over my face, work it into the skin of my hands. There's no longer any hand lotion or face cream, not for us. Such things are considered vanities. We are containers. It's only the insides of our bodies that are important. The outside can become hard and wrinkled for all they care, like the shell of a nut. This was a decree of the wives. This absence of hand lotion. They don't want us to look attractive. For them, things are bad enough as it is. So what do we see here? This is very funny, because this shows the tenacity, the pettiness of the wives. They don't want the handmaids to be pretty. Their envy and jealousy and hatred for their fellow woman is something that prevents them from having mercy towards their fellow women. In this dystopian novel, it's meant to make you hate religion and to hate men. But it does highlight how women are very cunty to each other. Okay? Now, I thought feminists would be like, there's a sisterhood. Why isn't they giving her anything she wants? But women are just as petty, just as vindictive, and just as nasty to each other as anything. Okay? But she uses the word, we are containers. And this is a very potent 3 words here, because when you actually like pregnancy, you like children, you like your husband, you can see yourself as a wonderful vessel. Your body is a portal for life. You carry your wonderful little seed within you, your little baby, and then you get the gift of it on its birthday, when it comes into this realm. And it's a very special thing to feel your baby move and to watch what you eat and make sure you got your vitamins up to date, right? All that. And the way she phrases it here is very callous. Very callous. Now, the women want the other women to look ugly, hard, and wrinkled, but the men, they want the women to look beautiful. So, they don't have to get hard and ugly for the men. They have to get hard and ugly because other women are jealous of their beauty. Now, the beautiful thing is when you have Muslim sisters who are not catty cunts and can get along and accept that they are going to have the same husband. They would not dare to deny their sister in Islam lotions and things like that, because Muslims have rights towards one another, and you'll be held liable for that mistreatment of your sister on Judgment Day. And tallow used to be a good moisturizer, it still is, but butter is not too far away from that. And milk, obviously, lots of wealthy women used to soak in milk, and it has a great moisturizing element to it, so butter is a very smart choice. The butter is a trick I learned at the Rachel and Leah Center, the Red Center we called it, because there was so much red. My predecessor in this room, my friend with the freckles and the good laugh, must have done this too. This buttering. We all do it. As long as we do this, butter our skin to keep it soft, we can believe that we will someday get out, that we will be touched again in love or desire. We have ceremonies of our own, private ones. The butter is greasy, and it will go rancid, and I will smell like an old cheese, but at least it's organic, as they used to say. To such devices we have descended. Also hints at the ingenuity of women. How when you don't have much, you still try to find a way to look beautiful. It's fascinating. As the bird takes its bird bath, so too will a woman, if she cares about herself, seek to make herself nice. Butter up, buttercup. Buttered, I lie on my single bed, flat like a piece of toast. That was a funny line, I think. I can't sleep. In the semi-dark, I stare up at the blind plaster eye in the middle of the ceiling, which stares back down at me. Even though it can't see, there's no breeze. My white curtains are like the gauze bandages, hanging limp, glimmering in the aura cast by the searchlight that illuminates this house at night. Or is there a moon? So you can see how the mind really tries to grasp at anything when you don't have the television, you don't have the sound, you don't have a radio, you're not allowed to draw, you're not allowed to paint, you can't have any crafts, so these women are quite deprived, And so, there's another line here. Down past the fisheye on the hall wall, I can see my white shape of tinted body, hair down my back like a mane. My eyes gleaming, I like this. I'm doing something on my own. The active. Is it a tense? Tensed. What I would like is to steal is a knife from the kitchen, but I'm not ready for that. So, she does mention earlier she wishes Luke was here. She seems to have left her room. She's sneaking out. She's going through the dark house. She feels out of place. It's not allowed for them to do that. And so, you can see why the handmaidens are not really trusted. Because they always think of self-harm and of harming others. So their mental illness, due to the, I would say, the rawness of their condition, makes them more psychotic, But a lot of the handmaidens choose to go out that way. I reach the sitting room, doors ajar, slip in, leave the door a little open. A squeak of wood, but who's near enough to hear? I stand in the room, letting the pupils of my eyes dilate, like a cat or owl's. Old perfume, cloth dust fills my nostrils. There's a slight mist of light coming through the cracks around the closed drapes. So here, there's this strangeness where she's walking around, right? And then it goes on further, but there's someone in the room behind me. I hear the step, quiet as mine, the creaking of the same floorboard. The door closes behind me with a little click, cutting the light. I freeze. White was a mistake. I'm snow in the moonlight, even in the dark. Then a whisper, don't scream, it's all right. As if I'd scream. As if it's all right. I turn, a shape that's all dull, glint of cheekbone, devoid of color. He steps towards me. Nick? What are you doing in here? I don't answer. He too is illegal here with me. He can't give me away, nor I him. For the moment we're mirrors. So you can see the behavior of Nick and her. They're breaking the rules, right? And now he kisses her. Okay? You can imagine what happens. I'm not gonna read it. I was coming to find you, he says. And then, she gets felt up there, Okay, then it goes on further. Why, I say, is it so bad for him that he take the risk coming to my room at night? I think of the hanged man hooked on the wall. I can hardly stand up. I have to get away, back to the stairs before I dissolve entirely. His hand's on my shoulder now. And so then it goes on. He's heavily pressing down on her. Is this what I would die for? I'm a coward. I hate the thought of pain. So she does mention how she's not someone who's really, really tough. She is more of a coward. She says so herself. He told me to, Nick says. He wants to see you in his office. What do you mean, I say? The commander, it must be. See me? What does he mean by see? Hasn't he had enough of me? Tomorrow, he says, just audible. In the dark parlor, we move away from each other, slowly as if pulled towards each other by a force current, pulled apart, also by hands equally strong. I find the door, turn the knob, fingers on cool porcelain, open. It's all I can do. So, here we just got another glimpse of her morality, okay? You may say to yourself, well, she's starved of affection, so of course she's going to just indulge and find a way. But she was an adulteress before. Okay? Nick, her former lover, was a married man. She would hook up with him in hotels. She's the property of the commander. Alright? And she's not supposed to be doing that. She's been trained at the Red Center. But the adultery that she's doing here, she's not married to the commander, but she's doing a form of betrayal that isn't allowed. So she likes to break rules, even though the protocols are there to protect her. Because Nick, if he wanted to, could easily turn her in. She would be then executed or sent to the colonies. So she risks things because she's an emotional creature who doesn't really think. She doesn't think about how to really survive, but what feels good at the time. And she ends up supposedly, escaping with her life from what we learn. And Nick helps her to escape. So the moral of that, the author is giving to us in a twisted way, is that if you cheat, it's okay if it has a good outcome. If you break the rules, it's okay if you have a good outcome. So she romanticizes adultery for our main character and also breaking of the rules. I don't think the morality of this character is good at all, but feminist liberals will rationalize away the poor choices and bad behavior of the woman. And then there was a scene, she talks about how Luke would obviously rub her pregnant belly, so she's thinking about the past, okay? And she talks about whether she wonders if he's alive or dead. And how she really regrets not really being there with him when it mattered. Okay, now in part 19. I am dreaming that I am awake. I dream that I get out of bed and walk across the room. Not this room, and go out the door. Not this door. I'm at home, one of my homes, and she's running to meet me in her small green nightgown with the sunflower on the front. Her feet bare, and I pick her up and feel her arms and legs go around me, and I begin to cry. Because I know then that I'm not awake. I'm back in this bed, trying to wake up. And I wake up and sit on the edge of the bed, and my mother comes in with a tray and asks me if I'm feeling better. When I was sick as a child, she had to stay home from work, but I'm not awake this time either. After these dreams, I do awake, and I know I'm really awake because there is the wreath on the ceiling, and my curtains hanging like drowned white hair. Feel drugged. I consider this. Maybe they're drugging me. Maybe the life I think I'm living is a paranoid delusion. Not a hope. I know where I am, and who, and what day it is. These are the tests, and I am sane. Sanity is a valuable possession. I hoard it the way people once hoarded money. I save it, so I will have enough when the time comes. So, you begin to see the minds of the handmaidens and how they have to really watch themselves. Otherwise, they lose themselves. But some women are drugged in order to make it easier for them to not be bad. Okay? Now, there's a cool section here that I wanted to share with you. The red birthmobile is parked in the driveway. Its back door is open and I clamber in. The carpet on the floor is red. Red curtains are drawn over the windows. There are 3 women in here already, sitting on the benches that run the length of the van on either side. It makes me think about, how Valentine's Day, everything is gaudy red. I mean, you always saw these weird vintage heart-shaped beds that you put a coin in and they vibrate. And everything is red on Valentine's Day. It's supposed to be romance and lovemaking and sensuality, buying special lingerie. But red, in this context, is more like blood. It's more of the, red dresses on a Jezebel. Demonic, witchy, untrustworthy, red flag, right? So the redness here has so many different connotations to it. The fact that everything in the red birthmobile is red is atrocious, just from a basic style point. The guardian closes and locks the double doors and climbs into the front. Beside the driver, through the glass over wild grill, we can see the backs of their heads. We start with a lurch, while overhead the sirens scream, "Make way, make way." Who is it? I say to the woman next to me in her ear, or where her ear must be under the white headdress. I almost have to shout. The noise is so loud. "Off, Warren," she shouts back. Impulsively, she grabs my hand, squeezes it as we lurch around the corner. She turns to me, and I see her face. There are tears running down her cheeks. But tears of what? Envy? Disappointment? But no, she's laughing. She throws her arms around me. I've never seen her before. She hugs me. She has... Okay, I need to read that part. She wipes her sleeves across her face. On this day, we can do anything we want. I'll revise that. Within limits. So the handmaidens here at least are very happy when another is pregnant, but she does mention how some can get jealous. Across from us, on the other bench, one woman is praying, eyes closed, hands up to her mouth. Or she may not be praying. She may be biting her thumbnails. Possibly she's trying to keep calm. The third woman is calm already. She sits with her arms folded, smiling a little. The siren goes on and on. What a terrible sound. But it just, an ambulance is red. Really loud so that you can move out of the way. So their birthmobile is very loud. When you think about when you're going through labor pains, most of the time you can go slowly because labor is not super fast for most people. By the time you start to feel contractions, and then the time the baby arrives, to be fully dilated, it takes some time. So I don't see the need to just rush unless they call the birthmobile when she's crowning or something. That used to be the sound of death for ambulances or fires. I just mentioned that. Possibly it would be the sound of death today also. We will soon know. What will Offwarren give birth to? A baby, as we all hope, or something else, an unbaby? With a pinhead or a snout like a dog's, or two bodies, or a hole in its ear, or no arms, or webbed hands and feet. There's no telling. They could tell once with machines, but that is now outlawed. See how she makes it so dystopian? That they've now outlawed ultrasound machines? That doesn't make any sense. If you're a dystopian empire who's trying to increase the birth rate, you'd want to make the machines there available in order to successfully deliver children. This is how you know the author is just going above and beyond to make religion seem primitive and backwards. Because if you want to increase the birth rate, you would allow the men to have more than one handmaid. You'd want the handmaids to be treated psychologically well, so they would flourish because they would benefit the child. And you would give them the food that they want and desire, and you would create a peaceful environment. And you would make sure they got the top of the line health care. You know, because you want successful births. Especially since in this dystopian world, there's a lot of pollution that are creating, like as she said, unbabies, deformities, right? So it really is just quite bizarre. The author just really goes through these moments of, let's just be extra, even if it's contradictory. What would be the point of knowing anyway? You can't have them taken out. See how she talks about abortion? Taken out. You know, so callous, so cold. Whatever it is must be carried to term. You could know just so that you could prepare medical things that needed to be done, you know. The chances are 1 in 4. We learned that at the center. See, 1 in 4, which is quite high. The air got too full once of chemicals, rays, radiation, the water swarmed with toxic molecules. All of that takes years to clean up, and meanwhile they creep into your body, camp out in your fatty cells. Who knows, your very flesh may be polluted, dirty, as an oily beach. Sure death to the shore birds and unborn babies. Maybe a vulture would die of eating you. Maybe you light up in the dark like an old-fashioned watch. Death watch. That's the kind of beetle it buries carrion. So, pollution. Today, there's a lot of pollution. We wonder why the cancer rates are sky high. You see the pollution of China, pollution of India. There was a train wreck in, I forgot. It was Palestine, Ohio? It was some place like that. I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact name. But all these chemicals spilled out. And the amount of pollution we produce is alarming. And it's not just fossil fuels. We don't have enough recycle. We should put more things in glass. Less plastics. But I think people will have to really push it in the future to turn the wagon around, as they say. And I'm not nihilistic. If we got all the technology to create a smartphone and to, you know, do some of the magnificent things that we've done in engineering and all kinds of stuff, I'm hopeful that they'll be able to reverse stuff. It's just that a lot of scientists are quite corrupt, and there's not really much we can do about that until their morality changes. But the things people do for money are quite atrocious, so sometimes us humans, we learn the hard way. I can't think of myself, my body, sometimes without seeing the skeleton, how I must appear to an electron, a cradle of life, made of bones and within, hazards, warped protein, bad crystals, jagged of glass. Women took medicine, pills, men sprayed trees, cows ate grass. All of that souped up piss flowed into the rivers. Now, factory farms, how she just mentioned here, souped up piss. Factory farms for pork especially, they have lagoons of just lots of waste, and because of the bad diet of the pigs, you know, you can't really use that as fertilizer. And because of all the junk they inject into the animals, you get a lot of E. coli in the soil, and when you have, contaminated manure patches, you really struggle with food safety. But grass-fed cows and chickens who are pasture raised, they have regenerative farming practices and this symbiotic relationship that's much more healthy. And we can do that. It's just Americans don't want to have their own chicken coop, and there's actually counties that outlaw it. And people are not really as kind to animals now. Before, you see a chicken, it exists, it's fine. Now you'll see kids torture animals, chuck rocks at it. That's why so many people now, they don't let their cats outside. You know you're in a safe community when you can let your cat out and they're fine. But countless people have had horror stories where they found their cat mutilated. Cats are a test almost for society. Is a cat and chicken safe in your community? Or are the little boys torturing it? Something to say. So, they've outlawed a lot of self-reliance strategies. Some places it's even illegal to collect rainwater. So you have to think about that. So, people today, they think they're better than growing their own food. And countries know food insecurity creates mad chaos. So they're kind of lazy in doing organic farming, and people don't want to pay extra for that. They rather buy non-organic food and then buy the newest Apple Watch, the newest iPhone. Humans in America like spending their money not on healthy food, but on clothing because they don't want to look poor. When you think about it, you can eat like a king and dress like a pauper, but people care more about how they're perceived rather than their own individual health. And then all of a sudden, health insurance bills pop up because you neglected your health, and now you're in a disaster and you can't sell all your clothes on eBay fast enough in order to pay off that medical debt. So something very interesting about that line about, polluted rivers and whatnot. It's really a problem. Not to mention the exploding atomic power plants along the San Andreas Fault. Now, San Andreas Fault, I've gone and visited that with my geology class. Part of it, San Francisco. And it's really cool when you stand right on top of it because there are some parts. And then we got to see apartment buildings that are built right on top of that fault. And you would think if humans are so smart, they would say, okay, we can't build houses right on top of an earthquake fault line. We're setting those people up for disaster. But you have real estate agents who say, why wait, baby? Let's just sacrifice them and make that money every month. We don't live there. So who cares? Let's just let them live on top of a trap that can activate anytime. So people kick the can down the road, as they say. Oh, it'll be a problem for the future. And why worry about it? Make your money. It's really quite sad. So the San Andreas Fault is quite long. You can see a lot of fault lines in California. And I think a smart community wouldn't build on top of that, especially if they didn't have the architects who can help build buildings that can be very resistant to some of the tremors that earthquakes cause. But, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? During the earthquakes in the mutant strain of syphilis, no mold could touch. Some did it themselves, had themselves tied shut with a catgut or scarred with chemicals. How could they, said Aunt Lydia, and how could they have done such a thing? So some women sterilized themselves so they don't have children because they saw how much pollution there was and they didn't want to give birth to deformed babies. So they didn't want to take that Russian roulette. I can understand that in a way. But some people gotta keep on producing because if you love humanity, you want to keep going. But at the same time, there's going to be other parts in the world where that pollution didn't hit. Right? It's weird that we read this line today because I saw another news story about the two-headed lady who's pregnant. And I love fertility. I want people to have kids. But if she has two heads, you know that she's got a very serious birth defect. To risk passing that on to your descendants, I think is a selfish move, and whomever married her, I think is a deviant. He has a fetish, and I think that's actually evil to reproduce his seed into the world when he's such a pervert. Now, I know everyone deserves love, I know. If she married a two-headed man, and they're two-headed, you'd be like, okay. Or she married another deformed person. But someone who seeks to marry a two-headed lady, I think has a very dark part in them. I know that sounds unfair, but I just think that men in the past, when you would look at hip to waist ratio, the size of a woman's bosoms, men in the past had this primal instinct to want to select people who had good genes. And women would do that as well. It's like visual. You didn't want deformities to be passed on to your children because you knew how hard the world would be for them. And you could say, oh, well, we have modern technology now, so it's really not that big of a deal. But you don't know how long our stability will last. The earth is filled with ruins. And so since it's filled with ruins, we cannot assume that America will have the resources to, help all those deformed people. Now, you always have to show compassion and love and kindness to the disabled. You have to, because they need our help. But when a woman knows she has the brain function to know she has serious genetic defaults, and then to willingly get pregnant, knowing you are going to sneak that back door into your descendants and give them this burden, I think is quite wicked. I'm not a eugenicist. Everyone has a right to live, but I think when you intentionally risk passing something so horrible down to your children, that's a bit selfish. So when it mentions here that some women decided, you know what, I'm not gonna let my child suffer with, because remember they said 1 in 4. That's a pretty high ratio. Okay? That's not a joke. That's not a joke. And so, you have to think about that in multiple ways. Said Aunt Lydia, oh, how could they have done such a thing? Jezebel's scorning God's gift, wringing her hands. So, here you might think like, oh, Aunt Lydia, she's really religious. But Aunt Lydia in the second book, as I mentioned before, she ends up tearing down Gilead because of Commander Judd and a couple bad apples in the government. So that's just an act. She really ruined her character, Aunt Lydia. I really wanted there to be someone committed. Aunt Victoria was committed in the second book. But, she really butchered her character, Aunt Lydia. It's like she undid it all, in my personal opinion. It's a risk you're taking, said Aunt Lydia, but you are the shock troops. You will march out in advance into dangerous territory. The greater the risk, the greater the glory. She clasped her hands, radiant with our phony courage. We looked down at the tops of our desks. To go through all that and give birth to a shredder, it wasn't a fine thought. We didn't know exactly what would happen to the babies that didn't get passed. They were declared unbabies, but we knew they were put somewhere quickly away. Now, it would have been better if later on she made it clear what they did. Either they were saved, or they were eliminated, or something like that. But the ambiguity, she has an opportunity to make the story more compelling. There was no one cause, says Aunt Lydia. She stands at the front of the room in her khaki dress, a pointer in her hand, pulled down in front of the blackboard. Where once there would have been a map is a graph, showing the birth rate per thousand for years and years, a slippery slope down past the zero line of replacement and down and down. So here, we know we have a lot of liberal women who they rather abort their children. We do know, though, that a lot of American conservative Christians not having as many kids. Now, there is another aspect of the government itself doesn't support mothers, and society itself doesn't support mothers. Think about this. Like when I was at community college, I said I had a child, and some young people who were a little bit younger than me, they looked at me like, what? What are you doing? Like, they expect you to have kids in your late 30s. You know, I had my first child in my early 20s, which is normal. You're very healthy then, right? As you get older, your body's more exhausted, you need more rest, higher rates of other problems. You know, you don't bounce back as easy from the weight gain. It's just different. It's different. Your energy levels are much lower. And it's fascinating how some places are just not kid-friendly at all. They don't have high chairs. There's no changing table in the bathroom is a big thing. There should be a changing table in the men's restroom and in the women's restroom, because some men, they run errands with their children. They have a diaper has to be changed. Changing the child on the dirty bathroom floor where piss is terrible. But the architecture of society lets you know, how much they value parents and motherhood. And I don't think we really value that. I don't think we do. A comedian once pointed out how there's not a parking space for mothers, expectant mothers. Think about that. There is for people who have a handicap, which is important, but they don't have one for pregnant women. You know, the way society treats pregnant women and frames pregnancy as this horrible end of your life phenomenon is quite sad. So, when liberals talk about the birth rate or conservatives, you're like, yeah, but are you guys having more kids? And they often hate giving food to the poor. Oh, if you don't have money, you shouldn't have kids. So you're like, okay, well, you don't have money, you're in debt. See, that's the other thing. You go in debt for your car, your mortgage, and your college education. You don't actually have money. You're in debt. Oh, but we have credit to take out that money because they know we're going to pay it back. It's like, yeah, but you don't have the capital. And what's the big deal about feeding people? We can't feed the world's poor. And you're like, food insecurity is created because the government could easily, like, you can drive in certain parts of California, there's nothing on the hills. Try to plant some apples and pears. Let there be wild orchards. Let some things exist. But it's just barren. And they think like, oh, well, we can't because, they won't survive of the drought. There's drought-resistant plants, date palm trees. Hello. That way if people can go and eat. There's so much you could do to fix food problems. I mean, you can even have a community chicken coop, a large one, where the poor can go there and get some eggs. And it's run by volunteers or government employees. Like if the government contracted small farmers to run that community-centered chicken coop, and the chickens were treated well. You could do this. You literally could. And some people who have yards, let them have quail or duck. And then those families butcher one and give one to the needy. A whole roasted duck. There's so many ways we could feed each other. Nut trees in particular. There's so many ways. But, as the birth rate declines and fertility goes down, we know chemicals are a problem, and culture is another problem. It's really quite sad. Of course, some women believed there would be no future. They thought the world would explode. That was the excuse they used, said Aunt Lydia. They said there was no sense in breeding. Aunt Lydia's nostrils narrowed. Such wickedness. They were lazy women, she says. They were sluts. I mean, a lot of sluts don't want children. It would make poor mothers. They care more about being passed around than settling down. You know, there are quite a lot of American women like that. I mean, there's a classic song, American woman, stay away from me. American woman, stay away from me. I don't want to see your face no more. Like that's a funny song. You know, like, if you see Cardi B, she's popped out, 3 children now? And she cheated on her husband, Offset, boyfriend, whatever he is to her now, while 8 months pregnant. I mean, if that creature, entity, can get pregnant, you know, why aren't these wealthy women? It's amazing how you don't really see a lot of the wealthy people who have money, have space, have a house, having a bunch of kids. It's really strange. It's really strange. And then you see people who live in apartments, and, you know, they got bunk beds, and they're having children. So, there's something there, isn't it? There really is this dichotomy that comes up in this book of how the women who don't want children are framed. So, I just saw a news story where it said Vladimir Putin of Russia has banned child-free propaganda. This book, to me, does have a bit of being anti-motherhood, anti-pregnancy, anti-religion, okay? It's a complicated book, but it does have that energy to it. On top of my desk, there are initials carved into the wood, and dates. The initials are sometimes in 2 sets, joined by the words J.H. loves BP 1954, O.R. loves L.C. This seems to me like the inscriptions I used to read about, carved on the stone walls of caves, or drawn with a mixture of soot and animal fat. They seem to me incredibly ancient. She just goes to talk about, you know, the varnish on the desk. There's things carved in there. So, you know, how kids leave graffiti and such. Okay. Okay, let's begin over here on this side. It says, a thing is valued, she says, only if it is rare and hard to get. We want you to be valued girls. She is rich in pauses, which she savors in her mouth. Think of yourselves as pearls. We, sitting in our rows, eyes down, we make her salivate morally. We are hers to define. We must suffer her adjectives. I think about pearls. Pearls are congealed oyster spit. This is what I will tell Moria later if I can. Now, pearls are beautiful, and they're grains of sand that get into the oyster, and then they get bigger. I worked for an oyster company, and I still have the binder on my desk. How stupid. Like 4 years I haven't got rid of that oyster binder. But it'd be funny if I don't want to get up and grab it now. But there is a thing on how pearls are made. But to just to call something that magnificent and rare and beautiful oyster spit is just not honest. She likes to reduce things down to the ugliness. And then that stupid character Moria, who I hate, who's vulgar, she wants to go tell that lame joke to Moria. You know. Now, think how I tell my daughter they're valuable, that they should be pure on their wedding day. They shouldn't be skanks. Now, what did the 90s tell us in America? BET. If you're a woman and you look at how Christina Aguilera, Shakira, J-Lo, how they dressed, you're like, oh dang, they was really brainwashing us, you know? And then you just see how America is the country of Babylonian harlots. That's what they export to the world. That's their commodity. The women of the most loose morals, surpassing France, surpassing Dubai. You know? And liberal feminists are proud of that. They think that's good, that's healthy, that's the way women should be. And they resent women who aren't lewd. I mean, we just had this viral moment in cultural zeitgeist. A woman who had 100 men in 24 hours, now she's shooting for 1,000. And, that to me is really sad. And to be valued for your purity and that you're hard to get is a good thing. Because men and women are different, but feminists think a woman can just have man after man and not be affected at all, and that's just not true. And even if it burns, women should be honest with themselves and say, you know what? It would have been better to be pure on wedding day. And if some of those women sat down and really thought about each person they slept with and asked themselves, do these men care if I live or die? Why did I share my body with somebody who I don't care if they die and they don't care if I'm alive? Would they even feel sad at my funeral? Why did I share my body with them? There's something to think about. But she always wants to frame Aunt Lydia's framing of morality as bad. So here again, you see that our main character is a Jezebel. She is a skank. Yes, she loves her daughter. She loves her former husband. But to me, she's a skank. And I don't respect her at all, our main character. And that's quite interesting when you read a book and you don't respect the main character. The van stops, the back doors are open, the guardian herds us out. At the front door stands another guardian with one of those snubby machine guns slung over his shoulder. We file towards the front door, in the drizzle, the guardian saluting. The big emergency van, the one with the machines and the mobile doctors, is parked farther along the circular drive. I see one of the doctors looking out the window of the van. I wonder what they do in there. Waiting, play cards, most likely, or read some masculine pursuit. Most of the time they aren't needed at all. They're only allowed in if it can't be helped. It used to be different. They used to be in charge. A shame it was, said Aunt Lydia. Shameful. What she just showed us was a film made in the olden days hospitals. A pregnant woman wired up to a machine, electrodes coming out of her every which way so that she looked like a broken robot, an intravenous drip feeding into her arm, some man with a searchlight looking up between her legs where she'd been shaved, a mere beardless girl, a tray full of bright sterilized knives, everyone with masks on, a cooperative patient. Once they drugged women, induced labor, cut them open, sewed them up, no more, no anesthetics even. Aunt Elizabeth said it was better for the baby, but also I will greatly multiply thy sorrows, and thy conception in sorrow. Thou shalt bring forth children. At lunch we got that, brown bread and lettuce sandwiches. So this is a very potent section here that kind of bothered me on a very deep level. Okay, I like to hear a lot of the home birth women, and it is true that if you have, excessive pain relievers, the baby is more drowsy. That is true. I like to watch women give those water births all natural, but some of them are really calm, and it's very peaceful. But when I tried to do that, when I was being induced with Pitocin, and I've talked to women who have given natural birth without Pitocin, natural birth with Pitocin, they say Pitocin is much worse because it's a chemical that causes the contractions. And it feels like you're being tortured. And when I had my first child, I was not psychologically prepared. And I had done so much screaming that I couldn't push anymore. And they needed to take out my daughter with forceps. It was so painful that my brain started to panic. And I was saying things like, I need to go home, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I was I won't want to say delirious, but I was absolutely terrified. And it was scary. And that trauma took me years to get over it so I could have more children. And I carried it with me. And so, an all-natural birth with Pitocin is and I ended up begging. We were close to dilation, but please give me the epidural. And they finally gave me the epidural, and I was beat. I almost couldn't push anymore. I was tired. And then an evil nurse, she mocked me when there was no one else in the room and said, "You couldn't push that little baby out?" And I reported her to the hospital, alhamdulillah. She got in trouble, and she was reprimanded, thank Allah. So, it is not fun for me. And then I got the epidural with my second child, but she wasn't descending, and I had been in labor for a long time, pushing for a long time, and you start to feel real tired. I was throwing up a lot. It was not fun. And so they said, okay, we have to do emergency C-section. Your baby is 10 pounds, mashallah, tabarakallah, and the shoulder might get stuck, and we're gonna have a problem. And so I know there's been home births of 9-pound babies, but all I cared about was my baby being safe. And any imbecile who calls a C-section the easy way out has probably never had one, because you're laying on the table, unable to move, and people have their hands inside your body, and you can feel the tugging and the pulling. And when you're finally able to get up, and then they push on your stomach afterwards to get the blood to come out, I was afraid to even look at when I asked my husband when I was in the shower, can you peel off it was time to take off the covering after 7 days. And I was afraid to even look, and I had him take it, and I said, how does it look? And he's like, oh, it looks fine, And when the pain relievers start to wear off, and you feel when you stand up like your guts are going to fall out, you cough and there's a sharp burn. And you get permanent nerve damage. Like in that area where the incision is, a little bit up, like below my belly button, it's numb. And I have trouble knowing sometimes when I need to go to the bathroom until I actually have to go, and the pain is really bad. You get nerve damage from that. So, and I just kept saying on the operation table, La ilaha illallah, over and over and over, because I remember in the Los Angeles hospital, I had read this report where the doctors did a botched C-section on this woman, and she died 8 hours later. And the hospital was sued, and the husband was distraught. So C-sections are a major surgery, and I'm thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have them, because it saves lives. If you think of House of Dragon season 1, you see what it would be like for women if they didn't have the pain medication and all the gadgets and gadgets hooked up to the women. You're gonna be sliced and you're gonna die. One thing I find fascinating is that I'm wide awake and everything's stable and they're cutting me open, but if I didn't have that, it's like your brain's gonna react to the pain and you're gonna pass out and you're gonna bleed out. I find this to be something marvelous and intriguing. It's like, wow, like people can get open heart surgery being under anesthesia, but if you would have open heart surgery while awake, you might die. It's like the shock and the nerves all play a part in how you survive these major operations and major things. So when she says here, you're like, oh, just induce the labor like it's nothing. Induction is so invasive. It's so invasive. My first child, I had to be induced, and it is horrible how many doctors are shoving things in you, mechanicalized. This is horrible. It's horrible. With my second child, they told me, we're going to induce you on this day because you're 41 weeks and come to the hospital at this time. But alhamdulillah, that same day. Like I was due at the hospital, I think at like 7 a.m. I started feeling a trickle, like my water broke. I started to leak, felt something, and I was like, oh, what is this? And then I went to the bathroom, I saw this liquid coming out. And then more liquid came out, and more liquid came out, and I knew my water had broke. And it broke like 2 a.m. or something like that. When it's dark out or something, I forget. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed my water to break, so I didn't have to be induced. But they still were like, hey, we need to push labor on faster, faster. You know, you should be farther along. So we're going to put Pitocin on you. And when you're in pain, like if you're not going to get the epidural, you almost hate that stupid thing you got to walk around with. You know, when you are free to move your hands all naturally, move your body. There's so many different ways women give birth. It's a different experience. So when she talks about this, like such like as if it was so much better, it's intense. I am though thankful for epidurals. I am thankful for that because I don't think I'm built for that kind of pain. You know. See, I can handle someone punching me, you know, getting wisdom teeth extracted, mental pain, something like that. But the inescapable pain of contractions has such it's like goes into your brain and it's intense. And like I would see some women, they're not even screaming and crying. They're just deep breathing and they seem fine. And you're like, how is that possible? But then you see other people who, like, they can't handle it. Like, there's women who have given birth, but they can't handle seeing an animal be butchered, you know? You see, like, everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. And my weakness, for sure, is not being able to tolerate the pain of labor. But I can tolerate other kinds of pain and struggles in life. So I wouldn't want to be a handmaid where there ain't no epidurals. I'll tell you that. You know, that sounds absolutely wicked. Absolutely wicked. Wicked, wicked. As I'm going up the steps, wide steps with a stone urn on either side, Off-Warren's commander must be higher status than ours, I heard another siren. The blue birthmobile for wives. So this is kind of funny. The red birthmobile is all red for the handmaids, but the wives get together and they're excited to see the baby. You know, that does have a sort of slave master appeal though. That will be Sarita Joy arriving in state. No benches for them. They get real seats, upholstery. They face front and are not curtained off. They know where they're going. Probably Serena Joy has been here before, to this house, for tea. Probably Off-Warren, formerly that whiny bitch Janine. So, Off-Warren is Janine, okay? Now remember, she doesn't like Janine at all. But Janine is the one who's getting ready to have her baby. Was paraded out in front of her and the other wives, so they could see her belly, feel it perhaps, and congratulate the wife. A strong girl, good muscles, no Agent Orange in her family. Now, Agent Orange was something the United States did to Vietnam. And when you see the babies born of the Agent Orange pollution, it's heartbreaking. A United States government did that. You know, great job, Christians. We checked the records. You can never be too careful. And perhaps one of the kinder ones. Would you like a cookie, dear? Oh no, you'll spoil her. Too much sugar is bad for them. Surely one won't hurt, just this once. Mildred. And Sucky Janine. Oh yes, can I, ma'am, please? So well behaved. Not surely like some of them do their job, and that's that. So here you're seeing the dichotomy between how the wives talk about the handmaids. This could make some feminists really angry. But at the same time, if you put yourself in the position of the wife, I mean, I can see how they talk makes sense. Because they're like, you know, who wants a very difficult, treacherous, dangerous handmaiden? Nobody. And if you say you do, you're a liar. Why would you want someone in your house who wants to harm themselves and harm you? That makes no sense. To have someone who is just respectable, has good manners, that's always more welcome. you know? More like a daughter to you, as they might say. One of the family. Comfortable matrimony truckles. That's all, dear. You can go back to your room. And after she's gone, little whores, all of them, but still, you can't be choosy. You take what they hand out, right, girls? That from the commander's wife. Mine. So here, you kind of see. I mean, little whores all of them. At first, you may think that's rude, but they fully vet the people in Gilead. Like, they learn, like, what's up about you. You know, who gets to qualify to be wives and such. And our main character is, I consider her to be like a whore. You know, she's just slanging it out. And she's a mean woman, and her best friend Moria is this skanky girl. And Moria chooses to go work in the brothel and get sterilized for the commander, so she gets passed around all the commanders. She didn't want to be a handmaiden and have children, right? She instead chose to get ran through every night. She chose that. So, are the wives wrong in saying that? When so many of the handmaidens, they leave that position and then they go to be literal whores for the commanders, which is an illegal operation. According to the dystopian novel, that's not allowed. But the commanders created that club for themselves, right? Where the wives don't know that's happening, but the wives can kind of perceive skanky behavior. And women, when they're honest with themselves, can identify the skanky ones among the group. Even if they're wearing a puffy red dress, the way they carry themselves, the way they act, you can see. Feminists say there's nothing wrong with being that way. There's nothing wrong with being a whore. But you have to remember, you can't trust the whore as much as the virgin. You know? There's a reason why, like, stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh, Ishtar, right? How she's this villain. Very lewd women who hop from bed to bed, you know, they can't really be trusted as much as somebody who has more composure and control over their base desires, right? So we'll pause there because it gives later on into some good action, okay? But really think about the world that's been created and look at it from different perspectives. Don't have knee-jerk reactions like feminists do. The feminists always think, the sky is falling, men are this, men are that, women are angels, blah, blah, blah. It's very black and white with them. And it's not even very philosophical even, you know. They don't really like to hold women accountable for their poor behavior. But we will in this novel when we dissect it. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, join the blog, support the channel, which I really appreciate. Plus, I post a lot of different things on there. Follow me on Instagram, and take care of yourself. Go drink some water. Take care.